What happens when the family you financially supported for 8 years looks you in the eye during Thanksgiving dinner and tells you you're nothing but a burden? Most people would be devastated, but sometimes the cruelest words become the catalyst for the most satisfying justice. Because while my father and his new wife thought they were getting rid of a problem, they had no idea they were about to lose everything they'd built on my back. Marcus Riley sat at the head of his father's dining table, the same spot he'd occupied every Thanksgiving for the past 3 years since moving back to Ohio. At 35, he looked tired, in the way that comes from carrying other people's problems for too long. His father, Robert, 67, sat to his right, while Linda, Robert's wife of 2 years, commanded attention from across the table with her perfectly styled blonde hair and calculated smile. The house smelled like turkey and tension. Marcus had bought the turkey, paid for the wine, and even covered the cost of Linda's elaborate centerpiece. It had become routine, Marcus writing checks while everyone else enjoyed the benefits. 8 years of monthly transfers, mortgage payments, medical bills, and emergency loans had kept this family afloat, but tonight felt different. "Marcus," Linda began, her voice sweet, but her eyes cold, "we've been meaning to talk to you about something important." Marcus set down his fork, a familiar knot forming in his stomach. These conversations never ended well. "What's going on?" Robert cleared his throat, not meeting his son's eyes. "Son, we think it's time you found your own place, started your own life." "I have my own place, Dad. I just come here for family dinners." "That's not what he means, Marcus. We mean it's time you stop treating us like your personal charity case." The words hit like a slap. Marcus stared at her, then at his father, waiting for Robert to correct her, to defend him, to remember the mortgage payment that had arrived just last week. But Robert just stared at his plate. "Charity case?" Marcus's voice was quiet, controlled. "I've been sending you $2,000 a month for 8 years. I covered Dad's heart surgery, the roof repairs, 3 different car payments." "And we never asked you to," Linda interrupted, her mask finally slipping. "You think throwing money at us makes you some kind of hero? You're suffocating us, Marcus, always checking in, always wanting to be needed. It's pathetic." Robert finally looked up. His eyes clouded with something Marcus couldn't identify. Guilt? Fear? "Your stepmother has a point, son. We can handle things on our own now." Stepmother. The word felt like poison. Linda had been in their lives for exactly 2 years, but she spoke as if she'd built this family from the scratch. Marcus thought about the phone calls, the desperate voicemails from his father before Linda came along. "The bank's calling again, son. I don't know what to do. The electric company is threatening to cut us off. Can you help us just one more time?" "You can handle things on your own? With what money?" Linda's eyes flashed. "That's none of your business anymore. We're asking you nicely to step back, to let us live without your constant interference." "My interference?" Marcus stood slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I kept you from losing this house 3 times. I paid for Dad's medications when Medicare wouldn't cover them. I bought every piece of furniture in this room." "And we're supposed to be grateful forever?" Linda snapped. "You act like we owe you our lives." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock Marcus had bought for Robert's 65th birthday. He looked around the dining room, seeing his money in every corner. The table, the chairs, the china cabinet, even the paint on the walls. All of it paid for with his overtime hours, his weekend jobs, his sacrifices.
"You know what, Marcus?" Linda continued, her voice rising. "The truth is, you're a burden. You think your money makes you family, but all it does is make you needy. We can't live our lives with you hovering over every decision, every purchase, every breath we take." Robert finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's better this way, son. Clean break." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger, not sadness, just a crystal-clear understanding of who these people really were. He'd been so focused on being the dutiful son that he'd missed the obvious signs. the way Linda always steered conversations away from finances, the way Robert had grown distant since the wedding, the way they'd both avoided his calls last month until the mortgage was due. A clean break, Marcus repeated. That's what you want. Yes, Linda said firmly. We want you to leave, tonight, and stop sending money. We don't want your help anymore. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. For a moment, neither Robert nor Linda spoke, perhaps thinking he was checking his balance to write another check. Instead, he began scrolling through 8 years of transaction history. $2,000 on the first of every month like clockwork. Emergency transfers for car repairs, medical bills, home improvements. The numbers were staggering. Before I go, Marcus said quietly, I need to ask you something, Dad. Do you remember taking out a credit card in my name last year? Robert's face went pale. Linda's confident expression flickered. Because I got a very interesting call from a debt collection agency yesterday. Apparently there's a $45,000 balance on a card I never applied for. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Marcus continued scrolling through his phone, pulling up screenshots he'd taken earlier that day. Credit reports, banking statements, loan applications, all bearing his name, none of which he'd authorized. The address on the account is this house. The phone number is Dad's. And according to the bank's records, the card has been used primarily for cash advances and luxury purchases over the past 18 months. Linda stood abruptly. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've been using my identity to fund your lifestyle while simultaneously accepting my monthly payments. That's fraud, Linda. Multiple felonies, actually. Robert's hands shook as he reached for his water glass. Son, we can explain. Can you? Because I've been documenting everything. Every transfer, every phone call, every desperate plea for money. I even have recordings. This was a lie, but Marcus watched their faces carefully. The way Linda's eyes darted to Robert, the way Robert's shoulders slumped. They believed him. You recorded us? Linda's voice was shrill now, the veneer of control completely gone. I'm a software engineer, Linda. I understand data. And the data tells a very clear story about a son who sacrificed 8 years of his life to support his father, only to discover that same father was stealing from him while calling him a burden. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the yard he'd paid to landscape, the driveway he'd paid to repave, the security system he'd paid to install. 8 years of his life reduced to a series of transactions while these two people convinced themselves he was the problem. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, turning back to face them. I'm leaving, just like you wanted. But I'm also filing a police report and a fraud complaint, and I'm canceling every automatic payment, every life insurance policy where you're the beneficiary, every financial connection between us. You can't do that, Linda whispered. Watch me. Marcus gathered his coat and keys while Robert and Linda sat frozen at the table. He paused at the front door, looking back at the house that had consumed so much of his adult life. The mortgage payments, the repairs, the endless cycle of crisis and rescue. All of it orchestrated by people who saw him as nothing more than a bank account with emotions. One more thing, Marcus said. That $45,000 you stole? The bank's gonna want it back, with interest and penalties. I hope whatever you bought was worth it. He closed the door behind him and sat in his car for a long moment, not because he was emotional, but because he was calculating. Tomorrow would be busy. Phone calls to banks, credit agencies, lawyers. But tonight, for the first time in 8 years, he wouldn't be wondering if his family needed anything from him. The next morning, Marcus sat in attorney Sarah Mitchell's office, a stack of financial documents spread across her desk. Sarah was thorough, sharp, and had experience with elder financial abuse cases, though this one was running in reverse. This is extensive, Sarah said, reviewing the evidence. Identity theft, wire fraud, potentially elder abuse of you, even though you're not technically elderly. How long did you say this had been going on? The fake credit accounts started 18 months ago, but I've been supporting them financially for 8 years. Sarah nodded, making notes. The good news is you have excellent documentation, bank records, credit reports, even text messages where they acknowledge taking out accounts in your name. This is as clear-cut as fraud cases get. Within a week, the police had opened an investigation. The credit card companies had flagged the accounts as fraudulent, and most satisfying of all, the automatic mortgage payments that had kept Robert's house afloat for 8 years stopped cold. Marcus received increasingly desperate voicemails. First from Robert, "Son, please call me back. We need to talk about this." Then from Linda, "This is ridiculous, Marcus. We're family. You can't destroy us over money." He didn't return the calls. 2 months later, Marcus received a call from his neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who'd known Robert for decades. "I thought you should know," she said gently. "There's a foreclosure notice on your father's house." Marcus thanked her and hung up. That afternoon, he received a text from an unknown number. "This is Linda. I left Robert. The house is his problem now. I'm sorry about the credit cards. Please don't press charges." But the process was already in motion. The district attorney's office had picked up the case. Robert, now alone and facing both foreclosure and fraud charges, finally called with something approaching genuine remorse in his voice. "I know I have no right to ask, but can you find it in your heart to forgive an old fool? Linda convinced me you wouldn't mind, that family takes care of family." Marcus listened to the entire voicemail twice before deleting it. 3 months after that Thanksgiving dinner, Marcus sat on the deck of his new apartment, a place he'd chosen for himself without considering anyone else's needs. The morning was quiet, peaceful in a way he hadn't experienced in years. His phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. Fraud case settled. Full restitution ordered. House foreclosure final next week. Marcus set the phone aside and picked up his coffee. Somewhere across town, his father was packing up a house that 8 years of Marcus's life had saved, only to lose it to 18 months of greed and manipulation. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 8 years trying to be a good son to people who saw him as nothing more than a bank account with emotions. Now, finally free of that burden, he could be what he'd never had the chance to become, simply himself. Have you ever given everything to family members who saw your generosity as weakness? Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who take the most while giving the least back. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hidden Hearth for more stories about toxic family dynamics, financial manipulation, and the courage to walk away from people who don't deserve your sacrifice.